Before we dive straight into the specific parties, let's look at how the playing field is actually shaped for this August 2026 election cycle. To make sense of the chaos, we've divided the landscape into two distinct categories. First, you've got the heavyweights, the massive parties and alliances that have the huge national structures, the famous faces, and a serious shot at winning. And then you have the others, the smaller players who are fighting for visibility, but face a much steeper hill to climb if they want a majority.
And trust us, we didn't just guess these categories. We actually sat down and combed through every single party manifesto, policy document, and political paper regarding this election. Because here is the actual catch. When you actually sit down and read through all of these official campaign promises side by side, like we did, you notice a fascinating reality. On paper, most of them are saying the exact same thing. They all promise to stabilize the kwacha, tackle the brutal cost of living, bring down inflation, create jobs for the youth, and build up infrastructure. Because the daily struggles of every Zambian are so universal, the political scripts naturally start blending together. Nonetheless, let's kick things off. One of the most prominent heavyweight coalitions trying to unseat the UPND, Tonse Alliance.
If you want to understand the wild game of political musical chairs among Zambia's elite, you just have to look at heavyweight number 1, Brian Mundubile. He is leading the NRPUP, which is the leading party within the Tonse Alliance. The Tonse Alliance is a group of political leaders and parties who have come together to go against the UPND. By the way, NRPUP stands for National Reconciliation Party, with the prominent lawyer who is his running mate, Makebi Zulu, who is also a former provincial minister of Eastern Province and also acted as the lawyer for the Lungu family during the controversial Lungu burial case.
Mundubile is a Mporokoso native, the son of a freedom fighter and self-made entrepreneur who naturally considers himself a born leader. But his political resume spans across literally every major ruling establishment we've talked about.
Right. He got his start back in 1996 at the University of Zambia UNZA convention when a politician named Remy Mushota recruited him and his university buddies to campaign for the MMD. That campaign caught the eye of Michael Sata himself, who called Mundubile into campaigning for him too.
Fast forward to 2008, when President Monawasa passed away. Rupia Banda, who was the vice president, then soon to become president, brought Mundubile right into his core campaign machine. After 3 years in power, Banda eventually picked him to run for the MMD ticket in Mporokoso in northern Zambia in 2011. Mundubile lost that election in 2011 and went back to his private business. But just 2 years later, President Sata called him back, and Mundubile defected straight over to the Patriotic Front, the PF.
And it paid off. Under the PF, he was appointed chairman of the Energy Regulation Board. Then in 2016, President Edgar Lungu personally called him into the State House and asked him to run for Mporokoso under the PF ticket. He won, serving as provincial minister and eventually as government chief whip in 2021. So basically, a chief whip in the parliament is somebody who pulls all party votes in line.
So he has deep ties into the previous PF establishment. But fast forward to the 2026 election, and he's now leading the Tonse Alliance. And honestly, looking at their platform, they have put together an incredibly thorough manifesto. They call it a social contract, and it relies on a core acronym, HOPE.
That's right, HOPE. HOPE. H stands for hard work, open governance, people-centered and economic transformation, HOPE. And it genuinely shows a deep understanding of what everyday Zambians are experiencing. It tackles the rising cost of living, youth unemployment, and it covers everything from the arts and fitness to energy and complete financial restructuring.
And remember, we talked about how people are feeling like the democratic freedoms have been tightening up a little bit under the current government. Mundubile's campaign promises to directly attack that exact pain point. He is promising to completely scrap and replace the highly controversial Public Order Act. Instead of the police using it to delay or block opposition rallies indefinitely, his new plan forces the police to give a strict yes or no to any public gathering within 48 hours maximum.
He's also leaning heavily into accountability, planning multiple independent oversight committees to ensure funds are actually spent well. Plus, the platform is surprisingly tech-forward. It pushes digital solutions to fight corruption, aiming to position Zambia as an active participant in the global digital future rather than just a place corporations mine for raw materials.
To fund all of this, his economic strategy is aiming for a massive 6 to 7% growth rate. To get there, he wants to completely ban the government from borrowing money just to pay for everyday spending. Instead, he's promising to introduce a windfall tax, which is essentially an extra tax on mining companies that kicks in automatically when the global price of copper goes above a certain threshold. He also wants to aggressively raise the tax-free threshold for workers, meaning you keep way more of your salary before the government touches it. And here's the wildest part of this playbook. He wants to put a strict cap on how many government bonds banks and pension funds are allowed to buy.
Whoa, hold on a second. Let's just pause right there, because that sounds like dry banking jargon, but it's actually a massive deal. What does capping government bonds have to do with the price of chicken on the street?
Okay, so to understand why this matters, you have to look at how Zambia's banking system actually works behind the scenes. When you deposit your hard-earned money into a bank, the bank doesn't just let it sit in a vault. They need to make a profit. Typically, they do that by lending your money to local businesses, entrepreneurs, or someone trying to buy a house, and they earn interest on those loans.
Right? Standard banking.
But here's the catch in Zambia. Banks look at the local business environment and see it as way too risky. If you walk into a bank today and say, hey, I want a loan to grow an independent media company called Africa for Dummies, there is a very high chance they will look at you, laugh, and deny the loan. Or if they do approve it, they will hit you with a crazy sky-high interest rate that completely kills your business before you even start.
So what do the banks do instead?
To make easy, safe profits, they take the money you saved with them and buy government bonds. Think of bonds as the government asking the banks for a loan. It's incredibly safe, there is almost zero risk, and the state will almost always pay it back with steady interest.
And it's not just the banks doing this, right? It's the exact same story with NAPSA, the National Pension Fund, where most working Zambians store their retirement money.
A chunk of the Zambian paycheck goes to NAPSA every single month. And what do they do with Zambians' retirement? They turn around and pump a massive portion of it straight into government bonds to take easy interest.
And that is the exact loop that the Tonse Alliance wants to break by putting a hard legal cap on how many bonds banks and NAPSA are allowed to buy. The government is essentially saying the gravy train is over. We are blocking you from hoarding safe government debt. Once that door is shut, these financial institutions will be forced to look at local businesses, local farmers, and entrepreneurs and actually invest that cash back into the real Zambian economy. It's about making sure the nation cashes in directly on commodity booms. It sounds incredibly comprehensive, but as an investigative team, we have to look at the math. The Tonse Alliance is proposing a $12 billion energy transformation, a $4.6 billion digital enhancement layout over 10 years, $2.7 billion for conservation, and $4.9 billion to overhaul Zambia's security architecture.
Wow. If my math is correct, that breaks down to roughly $2.4 billion in extra spending every single year. To put that in perspective, Zambia's entire national budget is roughly $14 billion. Can a highly strained small domestic tax base actually afford that?
Exactly. Now, the Alliance claims that formalizing the informal economy, which is just a fancy way of saying that they want to get market traders, bus drivers, and street vendors to start paying taxes, combined with freeing up bank loans for local businesses, will easily generate enough cash to cover everything. But here's the massive catch. Their math completely ignores the giant financial black hole they're creating. To pull off all of these big promises, they are promising a ton of brand new government oversight boards, regulatory commissions, and enforcement agencies. The cost of just setting up and running all that massive new bureaucracy would require a lot of cash.
Also, Mundubile has raised a few eyebrows after stating he wants to utilize money in the country's reserves.
Every month yake afuna chapa pa bank balance. Iyo ndiye wanzatu wa mu UPND. Wanzatu wa mu UPND tabene bafuna ni kuenda ku bazungu Nendo balangiza kuti now our reserves are 6.7 billion. We are doing very well. We are doing very well. Our 6 point. Wana kunyumba walina njala. Wana walina njala. Ma reserves ni amene. Government iliyonse imankana ma reserves. Ma reserves ni emergency. Sumamene. Uyu mukolo wina sana likutia ndalama zonse. Enzoeka kusina mkubanki. But enzoona kuti wana swako na njala. So
Right. And what are reserves actually? Reserves are basically like a country's emergency saving account, usually managed by the central bank, in this case, the Bank of Zambia. They are mostly held in foreign currencies like the US dollar. By law, this money is there to help stabilize the kwacha during economic downturns and pay for critical imports in times of crisis like the devastating drought Zambia recently had.
Exactly. It's the ultimate financial safety net. So when a candidate suggests tapping into that fund for general spending, it sets off major red flags.
Huge red flags. If you start raiding your emergency savings, international investors lose confidence fast. That can cause the kwacha to plummet, drive up inflation, and make daily essentials like food and fuel way more expensive for the average Zambian. You're essentially spending tomorrow's survival money today.
And outside of the math, there's a giant political elephant in the room that the Tonse Alliance actually has to answer for on the campaign trail.
What's that?
Voters are going to look at Brian Mundubile and ask, you were a senior minister and chief whip during the height of the PF regime. If you had the answers to solve youth employment, financial transparency, and economic transformation, why didn't you push for any of these reforms when you actually held the keys to the kingdom?
Especially since the core driving force behind his Tonse alliance is largely the PF itself, the exact party that drove Zambia's debt ratio to 140% and triggered the historic default in the first place.